some of our weekly correspondence. This comes from Wilmington, Delaware. It seems that Father Henry Miller there on Sunday morning was instructing a group of school children on sacrifice. He talked for about half an hour, and then he said, "What is a sacrifice?" And one boy answered, "A sacrifice is when my mother makes me watch Bishop Sheen, and I want to watch the Lone Ranger."
Travel along, Catholic pilgrims, for 1 year as we learn from Venerable Fulton Sheen, one of the greatest Catholic teachers in modern times. Join me, Amy Thomas, once a week for a short reading out of Bishop Sheen's book, Way to Inner Peace. Hello, Catholic pilgrims, and welcome to week 12. It's already week 12. I cannot believe that. This week gave me all the feels because it made me reminisce a lot about my time in Turkey, and I'm going to talk about that at the end because our topic this week is hospitality. And when I was in Turkey, I experienced hospitality like I've never experienced before in my life, and it's something that I greatly miss from my time there. And so this is a great topic. I really enjoy what Bishop Sheen has to say here this week, and I think you're going to get so much out of it. So we're going to get started right away because I have a lot I want to cover. And so the 3 points to think about as we're working our way through these readings are personal relationships, good neighbors, and trust. Number 12, hospitality. Great virtues are apt to pass out of civilization because the structure of society changes. When there were few cities and journeys were long and arduous, hospitality was one of the most frequently practiced virtues. Herodotus, the Greek historian, tells us of being shipwrecked on a sparsely settled shore and how a whole family went without food to care for him. One of our missionaries in the Pacific stated that he would never tell the natives of the island that he had even so much as a headache. Otherwise, they would sit up outside his tent the whole night boiling water and herbs and holding themselves at attention in case of need. Hospitality has not passed out of the world today, but to a large extent it has become corporate or organized. Institutions are set up to care for the traveler or the needy, as the care becomes less personal and the responsibility less individual. A few decades ago, no one in a horse and buggy along a country road would refuse to stop and pick up someone walking. Today, few automobiles stop to give lifts to those on the highway, mostly because too many hitchhikers have made hospitality impossible by their inhospitable conduct. Despite this, it is wrong to think the world is not fit to be trusted and that everyone is a rogue until he proves himself to be otherwise. Granted the changing ways, the necessity of the virtue of hospitality still remains, nor is it satisfied by identifying hospitality with the offer of a highball. The essence of hospitality is sympathy and kindness. It is selfishness which makes us think that the opportunities for hospitality are past. I thought the house across the way was empty, but since yesterday, crape on the door makes me aware that someone has been living there. The age of discovery is not yet over, and the greatest discovery yet remains to be made by every individual, namely, there are other people in the world besides oneself. As a former Prince of Wales once said, Number 10 Downing Street can never be a substitute for the good neighbor. Neither can the community chest nor the social welfare agency. Immediate personal contact, courageous embracing of the worries and burdens involved in full personal and intimate relationships. These are the bloodstream of a healthy society. On the last day, our blessed Lord said that He will judge us by our attitude to hospitality. When did we see you hungry or thirsty, or a stranger, or naked, or sick, or in prison, and not care for you? Matthew 25:44. Hospitality, therefore, not only has the duties of which we are aware, but also the more terrible awareness that it is Christ who is the stranger. In all our dealings, we are dealing with the Lord himself, though we know it not. Maybe if we could see our wars aright in between two trenches of the enemies, or between a plane in the sky and the target beneath, there is Christ's body being shot full of holes. What men do to one another, they do to him, whether the act be of kindness or bitterness, and out of those acts will come our judgment. The bold knight of the Round Table traveled far over mountain and desert in search of the Holy Grail, the cup of life from which the Savior drank the night of the Last Supper. His journeys proved fruitless. Depressed in spirit and fatigued in body, he returned to Arthur's hall. On the way, he saw a poor man writhing in the ditch. Moved with compassion, he dismounted, gave a cup of water to the suffering man, and the cup glowed with fire, as if it were alive with the joys of the new covenant of love. The knight found the Holy Grail, not in deeds of prowess, but in hospitality to the needy. Wells are made sweeter for the drawing. Those from which no one draws water for beast and fellow human being become polluted. Riches, too, become more peaceful when used as a fuel for charity. The poor cannot reward us for hospitality, therefore God will have to do so. It was these he asked us to invite to our dinners, and it is interesting to note that he always called them not meals, but banquets. There's like 1,000 things I want to talk about in this reading this week. I just found it so good. Maybe it's because we've all been away from each other and hospitality really hasn't been able to shine through in any way. I don't know. Or maybe it's because I'm missing Turkey so much because of all the hospitality I received there, which I will talk about. But I just want to start at the beginning of the readings. And I want to focus up at the very top. Bishop Sheen says, when there were few cities and journeys were long and arduous, hospitality was one of the most frequently practiced virtues. My family watches Little House on the Prairie from time to time because there's really nothing left on TV that's worth anything or that families can watch. And we enjoy it. We really do. And it's always so striking to me. There'll always be somebody in an episode who needs some food or who's passing through town, and everybody takes care of him. They're like, you want to come in for coffee? Do you want to come in for dinner? Do you want to come in for a bed? I mean, what do you need? And we'll give it to you. And everybody bends over backwards. And you just don't really see that as much these days. And I think the reason is because of what he spells out here. He talks about how hospitality has not passed out of the world today, but to a large extent it has become corporate or organized. Institutions are set up to care for the traveler or the needy, as the care becomes less personal and the responsibility less individual. And that's true. We don't typically stay at other people's houses when we're traveling. We stay at hotels, and they offer the hospitality. And, we don't need somebody to feed us on long journeys because there's a restaurant, good grief, every 100 feet, it seems like. And so all these organizations and these corporate businesses have removed, the practice of hospitality in our lives. And so it feels like we see it less and less. And I'm not saying that these businesses are bad. They do serve a purpose. There's a lot of people in America, especially. And so, we couldn't be knocking on people's doors constantly. And everybody moves so much nowadays because of cars and planes. We travel a lot more, and that would be a gigantic burden on families and people to just be constantly showing up at their door. So yes, it's good that we have businesses that provide these services. However, it does take it away from us. We don't have to practice the virtue of hospitality as much as we once did. And it almost seems really foreign to us, right? If we see somebody, broken down on the side of the road, we're like, they've got AAA or something like that. And we don't really stop because of all the businesses. And that's kind of sad, because when we are, required to practice the virtue of hospitality, it bonds us. It forms those personal relationships that are so important to a healthy culture. When we are so individualistic and everything is done for us and we don't have to care for our neighbor, which could be anybody, we kind of become selfish, and we stop looking for people in need because it's covered by something else, by some institution. It's going to get covered. Popes have talked about this. They really want help to come from the local level, because that bonds a community. And right now, all of the help comes from a very top heavy federal government, which is not personalized, and it's not intimate and meaningful. At the very local level, the people who are in need. You know what their story is usually, and you're better equipped to help them than some faceless bureaucrat sitting in Washington. And it keeps us from being giving people and reaching out and giving of ourselves to others, which makes us better people. It makes us happier people when we do that. And so it is kind of sad to me that that has been lost. And it's something that nowadays we have to be very intentional about, because it isn't on our doorstep constantly. We don't have buggies riding up to our doorsteps constantly. And so we have to be very intentional. I want to move now to another part of his readings. It's on the next page, on page 42. It's the second paragraph. He says, "The age of discovery is not yet over, and the greatest discovery yet remains to be made by every individual. Namely, there are other people in the world besides oneself." This past Christmas, I was back in Kansas with my family, and my brother and his wife were telling this story. And he lives in a very big city. My brother's family feels actually kind of lonely there. They live surrounded by people, but everybody kind of tends to stick to themselves and don't come outside that much. The kids do play pretty good, but as far as adult relationships, they are really struggling to find, just other adults to hang out with, other couples to hang out with. It tends to happen a lot in big cities. Anyway, my brother was telling this story. He said, every Christmas I like to make this special popcorn, and I go to the neighbors and, just give them some popcorn and, introduce myself if they're new, or say hello if we haven't talked in a while. I just want to gift them and be a good neighbor. And he said he went to his neighbor who lives directly next door, and he took his son with him, my nephew, and they went and they rang the doorbell, and the guy opened the door, and my brother was like, "Hey, I just made some popcorn, some special popcorn, and just wanted to say happy holidays, and, just here you go." And the guy was like, "I don't celebrate Christmas." And my brother was like, "Well, you could take it anyway." And the guy just refused it. And I was just dumbfounded that somebody would deny to receive a gift like that. I mean, I get it. You don't celebrate Christmas, fine. But if a Jewish neighbor showed up at my door and was like, "Hey, it's our season and we're excited to celebrate and we wanted to share a gift with our neighbors," I would totally accept that. When we were in Turkey, obviously we were surrounded by many, many Muslims, and on their holidays, they would always want to gift us with something, their non-fasting holidays, and I would receive it. They knew I wasn't Muslim, and they knew I was a Catholic, and it's just a nice thing to do. They wanted to share their special time, and the proper response is to receive. But in our very individualistic world, we have forgotten how to receive people's hospitality. And we've closed ourselves off. We shut our doors. We don't sit on our porches anymore. And we sit in our house and we watch Netflix and we sit on our screens. And then when a neighbor comes to the door, we're weird and awkward and we don't know how to receive hospitality. And that's so sad because that's what bonds a community. I listened to the stories of my parents when they were growing up and how they knew all their neighbors and they could tell you something about all of them, and they were in and out of each other's houses, and they were sharing meals together, and the women were taking care of the other women when they had babies, and it was just a life lived together. And it's so sad to me that we've gotten away from that. And so not only do we need to be more hospitable to others, but we also need to receive people's hospitality with gratefulness. You don't have to agree with everything. Like the guy didn't have to agree with Christmas, but just to receive a gift from a neighbor who wants to do a kind gesture is something that is okay to do. It doesn't mean you have to go to church and become a Christian all of a sudden. It's just a way to show thanks and be grateful and start to form relationships and start to trust each other, right? That was one of the words I wanted you to think about is trust. If I don't know you, how can I trust you? If I never talk to you and I never hear your story and I never get to know your name and I don't hear where you're from and who you are and where you work, how can I trust you? I'm not going to trust you probably. And that keeps us separated and divided. And I think that has a lot to do with many of our problems today. And so now let's move to something that is a little more joyful to talk about. So on page 43, down at the very bottom, Bishop Sheen says, wells are made sweeter for the drawing. Those from which no one draws water for beast and fellow human become polluted. That is it's such a good image, right? When we draw water from a well for beasts and travelers and other people, when we give of ourselves, when we give from our well inside of us, everything is made better, right? Our souls don't become polluted. When we give of ourselves from that well inside of us and we spread out that love and that generosity and that hospitality, things don't become polluted. And joy is shared, love is shared, charity is shared. People are helped in their need. And that's such a beautiful thing. And so I just want to talk about my experience in Turkey because it's unlike anything I've ever experienced before. So in Turkey, they are a very family-oriented country, very family-oriented people. Families live together, like grandma and grandpa are living with their kids and the grandkids are there. They don't even really have a concept of a babysitter because they just take their kids literally everywhere they go. I mean, when you go out to dinner for like 5 hours, there are kids just running around everywhere, going from table to table. Nobody cares. Nobody's upset. It's actually so beautiful and freeing because they just want the families around. They just want everybody there. And so they are very family focused and they want to build a personal relationship with you. And so they do things that are so hospitable. For instance, my family got COVID when we were there. And, after it was over and everything, one of the ladies that worked at my husband's work, she was Turkish, and she brought me this gigantic bag of olive tree leaves. Because everybody has an olive tree in their yard. If they have a home that's not right inside the city, they have an olive tree in their yard. And they have fruit trees in their yard. And she brought me this gigantic bag of olive leaves. And she's like, take these and steep them and drink them as a tea because this is supposed to help you get better so that you can get over any lingering COVID symptoms, that you may have. And so I took them home and I steeped them and everything. And it was quite good. But they just brought me this huge bag. They wanted to make sure I was taken care of. It's kind of like how Bishop Sheen was talking about how the missionary said they were, at attention at his door if he even said he had a headache. That's how they were. That's how giving they were and how attentive to you they were. I mean, they brought us lemons and oranges and all kinds of fruit. They always ate fruit in season, and they would bring you these gigantic bags of fruit, and they'd want to share it with you. And they wanted to share everything with you. There was this one restaurant that was across the street from our apartment building, and every day I would walk past this restaurant, and the owner was there with his wife. They worked there together. And when we first moved there, we would walk past and we clearly looked, American. And they couldn't speak any English and I couldn't speak any Turkish at that time. And so we would just kind of smile at each other and pass on by. As time went on, the husband would say hello to me. And I was finally starting to learn a few Turkish words. And so I could say hello to him back and how are you and things like that. And eventually, they started inviting me to have coffee with them. And so we would sit there. I would sit there with the wife. I would never have sat there with the husband. That would have been a big no-no. But I sat there with the wife, and she would bring me coffee. And she would bring me lokum, which is like sweets, little sweet treats. Sometimes like Turkish Delight or these chocolate-covered candies and stuff like that. And she would share it with me. I could hardly speak Turkish to her. She could barely speak English to me. But we would sit there and we would kind of try to talk to each other. A lot of times we resorted to our phones. But she just wanted to be my friend. She really did. And one day I was in my apartment and I was like, yeah, I'll order some food from them. And so I made a call. Well, I had somebody make a call for me and order the food. And the next thing I know, she's knocking on my door and she has this huge, huge tray full of plates and all of our food. I mean, we're talking huge. I don't know how she carried it. She brought it in, set it all out on the table, and she had brought me some extra food. And she was so happy to feed me. And, she was telling me thank you and that she hopes I enjoy the meal. And then she left and it was delicious. She made the best beets I have ever eaten in my life. And so I went back and I told her that. And so she was constantly, after that point, giving me beets just for free, just because she knew I liked them. And I had never experienced that kind of generosity and that kind of attention. Can you imagine a restaurant in America doing that for you today? Walking across the street with this gigantic tray and going into your house and setting the food out and being just so pleased to please you. It was so beautiful. And they always wanted to eat with you. They always wanted to take you out to dinner. And their dinners, like I said, were 5 hours long. And they just wanted to sit with you. They just wanted to be with you, to get to know you, to tell their stories, to laugh, to drink, and, just enjoy each other's company. And that's how you build trust, is by forming these connections. And business is kind of the same way. They're very hospitable. I mean, if you want to go in and buy something really fast and get in and get out, then not really. But if you're going to go and buy something very special, like a Turkish carpet or some kind of special woodworking or a lambskin, leather jacket or something like that, it's a process. You are not walking in and then walking right back out with your purchase. And so you would go into these businesses and they would bring you in, they would sit you down, they would give you tea, hot Turkish tea is very good. Sometimes they would give you alma chai, which is apple tea, and it's so good. They don't drink it, but they give it to Americans because we like it and it's super sweet. And they would just talk with you. They just wanted to sit and talk with you. And you don't even have to buy anything that day. They just want to form a relationship with you, which was so foreign to us as Americans because we kind of have a trust system. We go into a business and we trust that you're going to do right by me. and I'm going to make this purchase and then I'm going to walk out and we're not really going to have a relationship. But in Turkey, they're very hospitable. They want to sit down, welcome you into their business, serve you something, give you tea, give you water, whatever you want, some sweet treats of some kind. And then they want to talk to you. And then you get into the part where you start to, well, we're here to buy a leather jacket. And they're like, oh, okay. And so they want to have you model it, and they get all these jackets out, and all their attention is on you. And it's a really, really beautiful thing. And I miss it because I felt like I was seen, and I felt like I was, important to them. And they were important to me. And I made such great friendships there because of how hospitable they were. They shared everything. They fed you mountains of food. One of my dearest friends there, she wanted to cook for me, and she invited my family and another family over one night, and she cooked for us. And I'm telling you, it was like a Turkish Thanksgiving. I was like, Selma, this is so much food. And she's like, oh, I wanted you to try everything. And I'm like, you had to have spent days cooking all this food. And she didn't care. And we barely made a dent, but she wanted to please us. It meant so much to her. And as an American, about the only thing I could offer back was how grateful I was, and how thankful I was for their hospitality and to receive the gifts that they were giving. And that meant a lot to them. And also to talk about how beautiful their country was. They loved to hear us talk about that. And it's just a different mindset. And I wish we had that mindset here. I think we did at one point in our country. I really do. When I watch Little House on the Prairie, I see that was once a part of our culture. And like Bishop Sheen said, we have gotten away from that. And so I would encourage you to be more hospitable. If you have a friend or a couple that that would like to come over for dinner, invite them over. And I need to do a better job about that too. I have gotten lazy about it, mostly because I fear that people don't want to come over. And that makes me feel uncomfortable. But we still should do it. We still should start that movement of being hospitable to people and finding ways in our local community to reach out. And then on the flip side, we need to make sure that we are receiving people's hospitality graciously and not denying them that opportunity to be giving of themselves, to just receive it and be grateful and thankful, and let it build personal relationships and let it build that trust between people. So, man, there's so much more I could talk about, especially in Turkey. I could tell you so many more stories, but maybe they'll be pertinent to another reading, another week. But it really was special, and it made an impact on my family, a great impact. And I almost crave it in a way, because it's so sorely lacking here in the States. And it's such a shame, because all we have to do is just change our mindset and just start doing it, finding new creative ways to be hospitable. And I think that will make all of us so much more happy in our communities and in our own lives. So that is all for this week, Catholic Pilgrims. I will see you back here for week 13. And until then, live the faith boldly and travel well.